Hello and welcome to this short presentation on the flipped classroom. You'll understand in a short while why you're watching a recording while I'm actually sitting in the room. It will become clear. So what this is all about is what is the flipped classroom, what it isn't, and how really it's run for individual units. So these are the things I'm going to be looking at today, some quiz questions, lecture sessions, what are they all about, and have a little look into the flipped classroom just to see if it'll work for any of your units. It might not, but it might. Now, the flipped classroom is basically a blended learning model. So it's using multimedia, it's using face-to-face, you might even be using your labs, but it's just a blended learning model to try and assist the students in their learning and understanding. The basic tenets are that new material is studied by the students outside of class. So we don't have the old-fashioned sage on the stage, standing in there and offering new material to the students. The students already know the content by the time they see the coordinator face-to-face. And that's why you've got this recording, because the idea of talking to you about this blended learning model in an old-fashioned didactic method was just a little bit too ironic for me. So the students look at the new material outside of class session, and that could be recorded lectures, it could be readings, it could be other multimedia formats such as the YouTube video that you've already seen. And there is plenty of stuff out there. After they've done the reading and the lectures and everything, then some form of formative assessment, just to make sure that they know, they understand the content. And you can review it. It doesn't need to be marked, but you can review it to see if there's any areas that a number of students seem to be having difficulty with. I always assume that if one person gets it wrong, then it's a bit of a brain fade, but if several of the students get it wrong, then I haven't explained it very well. So then I'll go back and I'll try another way of explaining that particular concept. So that you can use quizzes, you can use blogging, you can use discussion forums, whichever suits your particular content area. But we do have face-to-face live, if you like, class sessions. The students should already know the content by now. You're not reteaching. So we're going to use this class session for deeper learning, discussions, application of knowledge, problem solving. And you can also use this session if you've gone through your quizzes and found an area of concern to just clarify some poorly understood content. What the flipped classroom is to begin with is hard work. You've got to get in your head what you want to get across, make sure that you've got the lectures, the multimedia information there as well, the supporting materials. Make sure you've set up your formative assessment clearly and that you've got well set out goals for your classroom session so that it's not wasted. What the flipped classroom isn't is just the same old method of delivery but recorded. So there is going to be some didactic content presentation in there, but it's not just that. And it's certainly not a way to save you actually having to speak to your students. In fact, if you do this blended learning model, this flipped classroom well, you'll have more interaction with your students, because when you're face to face with them, they're not desperately scribbling notes down or trying to understand what you're saying to them. They're interacting with you in discussions and in problem solving. I've said that we use some kind of formative assessment model. And because I tend to teach onto the sciences of radiography, I tend to use quizzes. And here are some of the questions that I've put up. I make sure that I don't need to mark them, that they are marked automatically to save me some time. And I also make sure that I offer the students not new information, but information that I've already given them in lectures or readings to try and get that stuck in their head. So if they get something wrong, I'll give them a little bit more information. I do try to keep this fairly light-hearted, as you can see, because it's formative. But hopefully it'll get them some further understanding, and it might just lift them to a question, say, Karen, I didn't understand that, can you go through? Here are some more from a different science unit that I teach, and again I put in, did you forget about this? I think about what the students might get wrong, and I try to set it up so that if they do forget that thing, that concept, then they can get the question wrong and I can give them some feedback for it. So I've said there's a lecture session, and this is checking understanding, deeper learning, problem solving. If you're going to get the students in to do a discussion, break them into groups. Makes it easier. And here are some of the questions that I've asked them to do. This is a fairly early profession-specific unit that I've taught, and I've asked the students to discuss break into groups and discuss one of these issues. So each group got a different issue so that we could all come back to the group and talk about the issues for all of them. And it gives them just that little bit more insight as to why we're teaching them this in the first place. And students have come back to me with this particular unit and said, you know, we did this in week 1 and we didn't think it mattered. We thought you were just ticking a box. But when we got into this discussion in the classroom, we realised just how important these issues were. So it gives them that little bit deeper understanding and perhaps some context for why they're having to learn it. This is from a year 3 science unit, so I'm asking them a bit harder question. This is clinical application of what they've been learning in the science. I don't expect anyone here to know the answer to this question. This scenario was put up to get the students to understand that there is not always a perfect answer. And in this case, there isn't a perfect answer. They've got to compromise and work with the equipment they've got and do what they can do to get a high quality image. I will say the students hated me for this clinical scenario because it is quite a complex one. But as they were leaving the class, they went, okay, now we see why we're learning this stuff. Because they are going to come across a situation like this at some point in their career. We all get student feedback, and that's important. Mostly the students in my year 3 flipped classroom loved it, and they were telling me that as the weeks went on, because I was saying to them, if something's not working, don't wait for the red button, talk to me. Talk to me by all means, complain about me using the big red button in the student feedback, but talk to me now so I can fix it. But here I've taken some feedback from the big red button, the student feedback, and mostly it was very, very positive. For the sake of honesty and transparency, I've put in red the only negative comment I got about it. And that's fine. Different students like different ways of learning. I don't have a problem with that. So that's what the flipped classroom is. New content is learned outside of class. You can use recorded lectures, readings, YouTube, other multimodality methods to get the student understanding the content. Give them some formative assessments so that they can self-assess how they're travelling. Then use the face-to-face session for more interactive discussion, problem solving, and application of knowledge. That's what we're after. That's what we're trying to get, this holistic learning experience. As you can see, mixed concepts about it, mixed feelings about it. But in the spirit of a flipped classroom, we've now got some formative assessment for you. I've given you the YouTube, I've given you the recorded lecture. Now let's have a look at these questions. How might the flipped classroom help with the delivery of your unit It might not. It might not be of any use for your particular content area, but at least consider it. It might help. Will it mean that you won't have to see the students? Will it mean you can just get them to do the reading and you don't have to do anything? Will it allow deeper learning by using the classroom session for discussion and problem solving? Or will it mean all of the above? And what sort of information can you use in a flipped classroom model? Recorded lectures, readings, multimedia, or all of the above? That last one is part of the face-to-face. Discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the flipped classroom model for you particularly. And again, there is no one perfect answer to that question. What will it work for you? And if you want further information, this is a link to the flipped classroom in nurse education, and I'm happy to give that link out to you. Check out other YouTube videos. I particularly picked a short YouTube video about the flipped classroom because I thought I'd get hung if I had a long one, but there are much longer ones out there that explain it in more detail. And how about have a chat with your colleagues? Or if you're interested, hunt me down and I'm happy to talk about it.